Hello COMS 363 students. In this video I'm going to go over improving visuals, focusing in part 2 on tables. In this video I focus on principles of table design that are argument focused as well as visual focused, and it goes over how to add notes to tables because those are very important for adding information that can't fit in the body of a table. I'm going to focus on the methods table because your methods section of the final report needs to have a table in it of demographics of participants. And it'll give instructions from the final report instructions, assignment instructions, and it'll give 2 samples. In your findings section, you'll also have the option to include tables. It'll provide an overview of what's required for that, and 5 samples I'll critique. The samples that I cover in this presentation are from real previous COMS 363 final reports, and they are reports that are usually on different websites than Fall 2016. That means that the numeric and comment data in them are not the same as for Asthma Society or SALT's website. They're for 2 different websites usually. And I've adapted the figures and tables to showcase strengths and weaknesses of table design. They've just been tweaked in order to be a more effective and concise presentation. First of all, principles of argument that create good tables. Good tables should be like databases. They provide more data than a paragraph or list can. And they're ways of indexing data in a way that a person can follow across the table columns, headings, and then scroll down from a heading across rows. So you're able to index and find specific data. And it enables comparison across rows and columns. It shouldn't just be random. It should have a unified title and theme and a unified purpose so that all the data that's displayed in that table has that unified purpose and theme. Avoiding unnecessary repetition across cells and rows and columns is important, while retaining consistency across rows or columns in the type of data presented. So that's a challenge oftentimes, is that we end up having unnecessary repetition, and try to embed as much as possible within the headings and stub column rather than repeating cells data. Order of the rows and columns should match the data importance and the purpose. The closer something is to the upper left quadrant, where you have the connection between the headings at the top and the left column, the closer it is to that corner, the more important the data usually is. So the first row is going to be the most important, then the second row is usually less important, etc. And the same with columns. Similar data should be grouped together, and categories should be clear in your headings across the top and side. The units of measure need to be clear in terms of is this number of respondents? Are these sample quotations? What are they? And then the notes under a table will provide explanation of the source of the data, as well as perhaps even the methods by which numbers are arrived at through calculations, if that's the case. Visual principles of good tables are related to the argument principles. The first principle is try to reduce visual clutter. Again, it's supposed to be an index of rows and columns, so try not to complicate that basic grid. And shading should be medium or subtle, not extreme. So avoid having extreme contrast, like very dark black on white. Or actually, it's okay to have black text on white, but the opposite could be very difficult for a column header. Color is not as important as it is in graphs, where you have shapes and rows that are long or short. Here, colors don't necessarily distinguish data as much. Colors should be more subtle. The main emphasis should be on text or on numbers. Reduce the number of rules or lines, which are basically, lines are also called rules. It's better to have fewer vertical ones than horizontal ones. because the vertical lines will hinder the flow of the reader's eyes from right or from left to right. Use spacing to group data. Often spacing is better to use than a line to group your data. Align your numbers in columns. When you give numbers down a column, then align them all up by the decimal point. If you have numbers that differ in their number of digits, like some numbers that are 10, some numbers that are in hundreds, some are in thousands, then usually you align them on the right so that people can compare them more easily. Headings across the top and the left side should usually be bold at least, and it usually doesn't take a lot more to emphasize. The emphasis should be more subtle in a table than it is in a figure or graph. Highlight the important data if you want to, using a different system of highlighting that is used in other table elements for emphasis. So not just bold. If you want to highlight one piece of data or one column, you could use a gentle shading underneath that column, for example, and keep the colors subtle when you highlight, if you use color. Minimize the number of words in order to keep the cell size small. It would be very unwieldy to put complete paragraphs or long sentences in a single cell. It's a difficult balance, but to have clarity of the meaning as well as the minimum number of words often means choosing the right grammatical form of a noun or a verb. And sometimes you have to say 3 words instead of 1 in order to be clear. Left align multi-line text. Just as you see on this slide, these are multi-line items. They're bullets, and they're left aligned right next to the bullet. They're not right aligned, and they're not centered. It's more difficult to read multi-line text when it's centered. The exception is when you have a column over centered data, like a column of numbers that are all centered. Let's say they're all 2-digit numbers or all percentages. Then you've centered that column, and you might also want to center the heading above it. How to add notes to tables. This is important because not all of your information will be able to fit comfortably on the table without wrecking its visual design and its conciseness. You could group all of your notes under one note below the table in a caption, or you could number several notes if there's 2 or more of them and put those in also in the caption right under the table. How you would number is in the table body. You can see this one appears as a superscript number 1, and if I take that off, the way I created it was actually to highlight this and then go into the formatting of the font and select superscript, and superscript will create everything in superscript text like that. So that will happen to the number if you change its font. And do not insert it as a footnote because, of course, the content of the footnote, the explanation of it, will end up in the bottom of the page when you want the explanation to be in the caption. And, of course, you're going to left line the openings of each note, italicizing them thus underneath your table. In the methods section, this is the kind of table that you're required to put in there for your final report. The instructions state, the methods section ends with a self-designed table showing your survey participant numbers and demographics. And it requires you to put at least 2 of these factors in here, age and sex, but to also go beyond that. So beyond their age and sex, choose at least 1 additional relevant feature to integrate into the table. So you can select any other feature within the demographic part of the survey, which any questions that begin the survey before the first usability or rhetoric question starts. So the main point is it should be a feature that also helps the reader of your report understand the diversity of the participants and the range of their knowledge and experience. Let's look at an example. Here's a table titled General Demographics of Survey Respondents. And we have gender, age, and then we have the selected category of website experience. And we see that the good table caption is formatted. The only thing that you could take off is the period after the number 1. And the capitalization and italics are proper for that title. The numbers are formatted as superscript, and this is the way that the notes are formatted under the table in a caption. The issue here is that the caption text is blue, and it should be the same for table 1 above. So either use the same font as you did for here below the table. They should both be blue, or they should both be the same. Okay. So blue is the standard that Microsoft Word has for a certain version of Word. My version uses blue for all captions. And italicize note 1, note 2, note 3, and then keep the rest non-italics. The simple design is here with the minimal lines. As you can see, there's no vertical lines in here. But even some of these could be removed. Even the horizontal ones could be replaced with spacing. That would be more comfortable on the eyes. The use of the bold for the column headings and the stub column is appropriate. It's subtle. It doesn't really require color or shading. And the notes in the captions explain other required information, such as question number, question wording, that kind of context, and the number of respondents total. Another sample shows that this person has chosen similar types of data instead of just having a column or a row saying, like this one had gender. Okay, this one breaks it down to male and female, and it has columns instead of rows. And it's got website authoring experience, whereas the previous one had website experience. Yep, it's very similar. So here we have an alternative. You can switch around the tables and the columns and the rows, but this stub column, the first column on the left, acts like a heading for all the other information in that row. So I should be able to say that the 17 to 19 age range helps to define that there is 2 males within that age group, 2 females within that age group, and the number of people with no website authoring experience within that age group is 2. Okay, so everything relates back to the stub column, so it acts almost like a heading for all the rows. It's an option to have the totals at the bottom of the row. It's always helpful to provide your reader with ways of summarizing or interpreting the number, the smaller number, in light of the total. And the notes do identify question numbers again, and even the specific question wording. For your findings sections, the tables, you're given an option of doing tables or graphs, total of 6 of them throughout your document, right? So numeric or textual could be used, and using at least 2 rows or columns justifies a table. And if you only had 2 rows and 2 columns, you might actually just be able to create a graph if it's numeric. But if it's textual, then it might be justifiable to have a heading row, a stub column row, and then 4 cell body cells. You could have, again, unity of content and purpose is another criterion, even when you're presenting data from 2 or more survey questions, and being able to justify a table, that it can't just be a bullet list, and that verbal data is brief. Moving on to a sample. Here we see that this is from question 15, but it's also broken down by age, sex, and post-secondary education, which are demographic questions. So these are 3 different survey questions. And question 15 is the textual information is well organized on the page. So that's a specific item within questions 15. That should have been specified. That's not the entirety of question 15. And it's good that they say by age, sex, and post-secondary education. So their whole title explains that there's a correlation going on between something on this side of the word by there's the word by, and then something on that side. Okay, so something is categorized by another survey question or 2 or 3. We have ratings across the top, and the scale is given. That's good. This argument is only useful, or this table's argument is only useful if you're going to find some data that shows a pattern that these things influence the way they rated that factor. So does age really influence how people evaluated textual information? So your paragraph would then refer to this table and be able to highlight what patterns exist. If there's no meaningful pattern, then maybe this table is not very useful and it just shows your visual design rather than your argumentability or your discernment. Now there's lines in here called total, and these are problematic in many ways. You know, when you create totals in even business, totals are usually added up, or sums. They're at the bottom of columns. But if you notice, this total of 3.85 is not a sum of 3.13 and 11.11. Therefore, it's not really a total, and it's misleading. What this line really is a line that should probably be worded all ages, or this one should be both sexes. It would also be helpful to have a column before the ratings to say the number of people that are in that category. So if we have 17 to 19, it looks amazing that 50% of them are here, unless we find out that only 2 people are in that category. Then it's not surprising that 50% were here and 50% were there. So it can aid interpretation if you gave total number of respondents. This category at the bottom is confusing because this is not the wording of the survey question. So post-secondary education is a very general heading, and it was a more specific question, like highest level of post-secondary education. And it's possible for a person to be enrolled in a bachelor's degree and also have achieved yet a different bachelor's degree earlier in their life. So it's these wording question stems are not really clear either. And of course, there's missing wording and other information in the notes. You need to have the other question numbers, etc. The zebra striping here of alternating gray with white is not really necessary. It's just a way of getting away with not having horizontal lines between the rows. And it could be easy to achieve readability without the zebra striping. We also have inconsistency in that these headings of age and sex are on a gray stripe. This heading here of post-secondary education is not on a gray stripe. So it can be optional and not really helpful to have that. But vertical spacing was very useful to separate the age data from the sex data and to have a vertical or a horizontal space here. Okay, so the spacing features otherwise are very good. Next sample. Here we have a table that looks like 2 tables stacked on top of each other. If you remember from Tabot and Draga's textbook, that was a design of a table that they really didn't like. And here it's also a problematic feature. We have 1 table number and 1 table title, but yet we have these subheadings. Let's look at the table title. It's very general. Survey results of website usability. We know that website usability involves more than visuals and more than text content. And so that's an issue, is that this is way too general in order to justify the unity of these 2 very specific areas of usability, or even text content. It's not necessarily usability, but usefulness and rhetoric. So the other ways in which these are not really married well, you can have a table with 2 different scales in it and explain them if it's unified. But you can see here that this question, visual aspects, it came from one that had ratings of very poor, satisfactory, and excellent. And this one had rating with different wording. Frequent problems, occasional problems, and excellent. As you can see, that satisfactory is the middle rating. Problems, occasional problems, is the middle rating over here. So this middle rating is kind of positive-ish. This middle rating is negative-like, okay? So the wording, as you can see, is important for people giving the ratings because they're interpreting the number 3 by the word, not just by the number. If you notice the highlights, the yellow is a bit overdone because it's too vibrant. It's not very subtle. But we have here the highlights are on the positives, the satisfactory and excellent. The highlighting over here is on the negatives, the problems. So that's another feature that makes this makes a person wonder, why can't this just be separated into 2 different tables? Why is it joined even together? So the question numbers are not given anywhere. They need to be given in the notes again. It does helpfully explain in this note, however, how a rating scale of 5 numbers could actually be categorized. Let's see here. The last column in table 2 totals 2 individual columns as highlighted. No, it doesn't actually help us in terms of understanding what was done with ratings of 2 and ratings of 4, because there were 5 ratings, not just 3 in the survey. So that's also another puzzle that the reader is wondering, where did you get these data from? Did you combine 1 and 2 ratings when you did this frequent problems? Next example, just to give you some other ideas. This one has a good table placement. This one was incorrect. If we look back, it's underneath and it should be above. This one's properly above. It uses the italics on the second line. It uses title case capitalization on every important word. Just remove the period there. Underneath, the notes are numbered. There's at least 2 of them, so they can be numbered. Just italicize the notes and take off the bold. And then after the word note 1, it can be in regular non-italics. Some of the issues with this table, a person wonders, is it unified? Does it have a consistent purpose? Is it able to support an argument? So again, looking at that, the title, survey participant sidebar navigation rating, that would only require two columns, and the columns that we'd need is just their ratings and how many people or percentages of people got that rating. So this is incomplete. As you can see, it's correlating 2 questions. It's 23 and 28. Question 23 was the navigation rating based on the overall wording of the website's navigation and overall structure, and it's taken an item, a specific answer item on the sidebar navigation item within question 23. And it gives a little bit of a rating scale. There we go. Doesn't give numbers, but at least it gives words. And note 2 is actually quite confusing because question 28 is a negative question. What did you find most frustrating or annoying about this website? It's this negative data, and yet it's categorized with a positive word, yes. So that could be confusing in English because yes is positive. Question 28 asks, what's negative? So it's basically saying, yes, there was negative data, negative comments. So that could be contradictory. And it's not saying whether this is the number of comments or the number of participants who gave comments. So that could be misleading. The no column might be better replaced by a total number. So 7 out of 19 gives you a 37%. That might be more useful. Next. This one shows the same table as we saw on the previous slide, and it just shows how to talk about it in text. Okay, so this is a sample of text. You name the title of the table, the number of it, and this explains the purpose. So paragraphs and sentences explain way more than what would go into a note, right? This gives more of a, you're talking to your reader here, whereas your notes underneath a table are just explaining the source and the basic meaning of the data. So this is helpful. We analyzed the survey data to discover if there was a correlation between sidebar navigation ratings and navigation comments on the overall weaknesses of the website. That really explains why it's important to even include such a table or to correlate those two questions. This, in red, I highlighted the itemization. First we did this, next we did that. And the question wording is also in quotation marks again here. It repeats what's found in the notes, but what it does here is it usefully prevents the reader from having to flick back and forth with their eyes or by moving down their cursor or changing pages. When a person's reading a paragraph, they shouldn't have to be interrupted with the need to look at a figure or table. They should be able to look at the figure or table at their leisure when they're finished reading that paragraph. They should have a continuous flow through their paragraph and not feel like they have to go to the table. So this is functional repetition. It's very useful. And this one here is a good example because it pulls out one of the important features of the table. It's not going to tell us everything in the table, which is good because a table should augment or supplement the text in a paragraph. So you're only going to pull out something that's significant or worth commenting on or is an example of a pattern. And here they focus on the most frequent rating for the sidebar navigation was satisfactory. As you can see, 7 is the highest number in this column, and it aligns with satisfactory. And what it does is it pulls that out and puts it into a sentence here. The problem here is that 19 has no correspondence to any number in the table, and that's why I suggested that perhaps this column, instead of no, could be total number of respondents. This one here helps to explain among those 19 respondents, 7 of them still mentioned navigation as an overall website weakness. And so far, all we've done is we've summarized a little piece of the data, and we haven't provided any analysis. So this paragraph should ideally continue with at least one more sentence commenting on the significance of this fact. What does it mean in terms of evaluating the overall strength or weakness of the navigation on this site? Maybe it only comments on the sidebar, and maybe it's overall navigation. The next final table I want to look at is an example of how to include larger amounts of text. And as you can see, these are bulletized to show the itemization. Without the bullets, they would all blend together. And then you can see how wide this column has been made in order to accommodate the length of the text. And a person would have to justify that these are useful in terms of, are they helpful for the reader to be included in this table at all, or do we need all of these? Maybe there's only a need for 2 each or 1 each. The table are good. It's good because these are all left justified. We also have, let's look at the purpose and the content. The title is Criticisms of the Mood Disorder Society of Canada's Navigation. And this is based on question 23, these 2 rows. And this question is from question number 17, it says in the notes. And question 17 is on finding information. Question 23 is on navigation. They're related to the title of navigation, so that's great. They're unified. The challenge comes in when these ratings are actually based on a different rating scale. This 2.5 is based on a rating of 1 to 4. 3.4 is based on a rating of 1 to 5. Obviously, 2.5 out of 4 is not that bad. 2.5 out of 5 is worse. So it is misleading and skewed because this column is not consistent in the value that is being displayed. So it should be created in a way that this could be an average or an a number out of a total. For example, this could all just be a number that represents the degree of negative criticisms, because this column focuses on the negative. They're selected criticisms. So wouldn't it be helpful if the numbers also related to negativity in ratings? So you could give the number of people who gave poor ratings on each of these scales. So that's my video for today, and I hope that that helps you to understand how to create good figures, or actually good tables. So I recommend my next video on graphs. Talk to you later.